Welcome to Ielts Cast episode 48. Before starting the episode, I just want to announce that the 2021 versions of my Ielts Task 1 and 2 writing ebooks will be released a little later this year, so please keep your eye out for them. As always, if you purchased an earlier version of any of the ebooks, just let me know by email at ryan@ieltsielts.com, and I will forward the updated version to you free of charge. Another announcement is the launch of my second speaking course on the Udemy platform. This course is available completely free of charge until the end of July 2020 as part of its launch promotion. So be sure to go and sign up for it while the promotion is still on. There are about 10 days of promotion time remaining. Now, without further ado, here is Ielts Cast episode 48. Today I'm speaking with Leon, an Ielts candidate from Russia. Leon took his first exam in February of this year, 2020, and he scored an overall of 7.5 with specific scores of 8.5 in listening, 8 in reading, 7 in writing, and 6.5 in speaking. And I think that you're going to find my conversation with Leon to be very helpful to your own strategies, especially those of you out there that are Russian speakers and can understand the context within which Leon took the examination and prepared for the examination. So, Leon, I'd like to welcome you to the show and thank you for sharing some time with us today.
Hi, Ryan.
So, Leon, let's start by talking about you and creating a profile of who you are. So, why did you take the IELTS?
Well, I took general IELTS because I found out that I could immigrate to Canada, and so that was my main purpose. And I needed bands 8 in listening and other 7 bands.
Yeah, that's right. So as part of the Canadian immigration process, you win points if you score bands 7 in reading, writing, and speaking, and band 8 in listening, right?
Yes, right. I am from the far east of Russia. It's Vladivostok city, and actually, when I started my preparation to IELTS, I had a pre-intermediate level. It's pretty low, but I had very quite strong English background, because I had been studying my English throughout my school and university. But unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to apply my knowledge on practice. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my knowledge was thrown away for decades. And when I started my preparation to IELTS, as I said before, my level was pre-intermediate. And I went to English center and took English classes. I went for these classes for about 1 year, and I had 3 classes a week for 1 hour and a half for one lesson. Mm-hmm. And throughout this lesson, I studied a lot of grammar, because grammar was my problem. Initially, I didn't have a grammar at all, and once I had been going to my lessons, for half a year, I began practicing my writing.
Mm-hmm. Now, you scored an incredible 8.5 in your listening mark, as your listening mark. And this was your first attempt at the examination. So can you just explain to us, why was the score so high? What did you do to prepare for that section?
Well, initially it was my worst skill. I couldn't understand English speech at all. All words in sentences we've used, and it was like one big word. But then, since I was learning new vocabulary, all these words began split, and then I started to understand sentences more clearly. Mm-hmm. And I think that listening skill can be improved only through practice. There is no other way to improve this skill. So I was listening to English conversation podcasts and so on for about more than 1 hour a day. And since I started doing so, my English listening skill began improving considerably.
And which podcasts were you listening to?
Well, there are several sources, but I started my listening learning journey from website learnenglish.britishcouncil.org. It's like British Council official website where you can choose your level of listening and do some pretty easy and listen to some pretty easy conversations and then answer to the question. Also, I downloaded an application from British Council. It is called Learn English, and there are also very simple conversation and transcripts for them. Then I started listening to BBC podcasts. It's Science Hour podcasts and Y Factor podcasts.
Okay.
And also I was watching TED Talks and watching YouTube videos, especially related to grammar videos. I was watching only grammar videos in order to improve my grammar.
And so can you suggest a YouTube video that you found particularly helpful, or a YouTube channel that you found helpful?
Actually, there are two teachers that I found very helpful. It's you, of course, and Adam. He's from Canada. You probably must have heard of him.
I think so. He's the gentleman that has the small beard. Is that right? And he teaches with a whiteboard in the background?
Yeah.
Yes, right. Yeah. I think he's with Engvid, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. He has three channels, and all of them are very useful. And actually, I gain a lot of writing experience. I mean, about grammar structure and grammar patterns, about sentences structure. I gain a lot from his videos. And also I was watching movies with subtitles. I found it quite helpful because when you listen and read, you can simultaneously become aware of pronunciation of words, and also you improve your speed of reading because you have to read fast when you watch a movie. And then the final part of my listening preparation was a book named Collins, I think Collins Book for Listening, something like that.
Okay.
There is a book that contains a lot of listening tests and explanation for them and how to cope with each part in listening section. And I want to mention that there is that I didn't practice on Ielts exams. It was a mistake. I started to practice on Ielts tests, but they really can't improve your listening skill because they only test your ability. They only test your listening skill, but not improve it. So you can only become aware of your listening score when you're doing this Ielts tests. So I recommend not using Ielts tests as a source for improving listening skill.
And so while you were using all these different strategies, were you keeping a journal of any kind?
Well, I don't think that I keep any journal. They are just in my head, but I can explain how to cope with some of tasks, listening tasks. For example, it was very challenging for me to spell names and towns. And the solution for this is to spell your name, your surname, your address aloud, and also your mobile phone could be spelled. You just say spell your address aloud.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. And also there are some videos on the YouTube that spell some words for you, some unusual words, like English series, for example.
Mm-hmm.
They are quite helpful. Well, the most challenging part for me in listening exam was multiple choice section, because this section contains a lot of information, a lot of text, and you need to read through all this text and become aware of what are the questions, highlight different words, and read as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very difficult. And fill the gap. This section is quite easy. It's always 4-section listening exam. I was said that it was the hardest section, but I found it pretty easy, because actually the correct answer will be somehow highlighted in the audio.
Mm-hmm.
So you just need to get used to catch this word from the audio, and it's not very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they ask you to choose from the list. It's like a listening task. So they also this audio going through all this list, and you need to pay attention what are the wrong answers and cross out them, and then you will get correct answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to mention about map task. Map task is always will be guided from bottom to top. So, otherwise, it would be reversed direction.
Mm-hmm.
If the map would be described from top to bottom, left would be right. And so in the real IELTS exam, map describe it from bottom to top.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's very important to learn how to spell words correctly. Especially, it was very difficult to me to learn how to spell words with hyphen.
Okay.
And in my real exam test, I had word part-time, and I wrote it through hyphen. And then I was hesitating for about a few minutes how to spell this word.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, I rubbed out the hyphen and make it whole word. And actually it was correct. The most important part when I was preparing to listening test, that I read all the transcripts that are in the IELTS book and listen simultaneously. And so then so that I can become aware of pronunciation and learn how to construct sentences and where to find right answer.
Mm-hmm.
So, and as reading and listening skill, and also I wanted to add that then I read these transcripts aloud simultaneously with the speaker and trying to mimic speaker, because I think that speaking, reading, and listening are quite interwoven.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped me to read aloud simultaneously with the speaker.
Yeah, that's an interesting strategy. I have not heard of people doing that specific strategy before, but that does make a lot of sense. I mean, in my in-class lessons, I do a lot of listen and repeat activities. So it's essentially, we'll take a script like that, and I will read parts of the phrases and have the students in the classroom repeat after me, and it's like you said, it's a very good exercise for helping students to kind of fine tune their intonation and their pronunciation, and to sort of listen for and practice what syllable to add stress to sound as much like a native speaker as possible. But yeah, so that's a great suggestion for those of you that are listening to this, is to follow what Leon did, which is to listen to the audio, and at the same time, with the transcript in front of you, read along and try to mimic the speaker's intonation and speaking, and you know, the different nuances to the way that they're pronouncing words and phrases. So that's a very helpful strategy. So anything else that you'd like to share?
Yes, I want to share that when I did practice tests, I did it entirely. I mean, with transferring answers to the answer sheet, and I timed myself for 10 minutes to this. And actually, when I came across about my wrong answers, I re-listen the audio until I can hear correct answer, and only then I go to the page with transcripts. It was very important for me to hear myself the correct answer.
Yeah.
And actually, one listening test, it took about from 1 to 2 hours to take one listening tests with this reading transcripts and reading aloud and re-listening, from 1 to 2 hours.
Okay, yeah, because you were doing it multiple times, you mean?
Yeah.
So I'll just remind everybody. So you scored band 8 in reading, which for your first exam is really a very amazing score. So walk us through the preparation that went into getting that band 8.
Well, actually, I have a very good comprehension of reading, and I was quite surprised that I got 8 instead of 9. At practice tests, I was able to get 9 easily in 40 minutes. That's because I learned a lot of vocabulary and a lot of synonyms and paraphrase words. So the most important thing in reading is to learn new vocabulary and note this vocabulary. And what I did, I note this vocabulary by handwriting in my paper notebook, because when you write by your hand, you are more likely to remember this word in the future instead of doing this digitally. Of course, I have an online dictionary at Cambridge Dictionary, but also I have my paper dictionary, and it contains as much as about 3,000 of words. And of course, I don't know some of them, but a lot of them I know very well. And since I learned new vocabulary, and probably since I've been learning new vocabulary, it was not hard to understand reading, to understand text, to come to texts, to comprehend these texts. And the main strategy, what I did for reading, as I took a general IELTS tests, I had a last section. It was an academic test for about 2 pages, and every day I read one academic text in 18 minutes. I timed myself. I have a wristband, and I set a timer for 18 minutes and read one academic text for 18 minutes. Actually, it helped me a lot, because when I first read an IELTS IELTS texts, I was overwhelmed by new vocabulary. I had about 30 words and one text, and I didn't understand anything. I had about 3 correct answers from 13, I think. But then, when I was getting aware of new vocabulary, I was able to read more quickly, more easily. The main advice is to read quickly, yet attentively, but not read through. I didn't read through. I read carefully, but very quickly.
Yeah, and so you were again running exercises to time yourself to help push your speed as fast as you could, to push it to accelerate.
Yes, and also I want to mention that I didn't read from the screen. I print out all texts and read paper text because I took a paper-based exam and I wanted to be more closely to. I wanted to be more close to a real exam because in the real exam I had to read from paper.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Also, I want to mention that as I was reading, I highlight new vocabulary. While I was reading, I highlight new vocabulary in the texts, and it's for me because when I finish reading, I can look up this vocabulary in unfamiliar words in dictionary, and it's important to while you're reading to highlight dates and names in the real exam for answer purposes, so that you can easily bring back and find a specific date or a specific name. And also it is important to work out your wrong answers and understand the reason why these answers are wrong. Actually, sometimes it's hard to understand because sometimes words, questions can be tricky, like true or false. It's a very tricky section. And I think that at the beginning of my preparation, I was very deceived by this type of questions. But then I work out how it's a matter of practice, I think, how to cope with these questions. But there probably can be headings to assign headings to the paragraph. I read one paragraph and then read through the headings and assign one. But I didn't. Actually, the main advice is to write answers right into the answer sheet because you won't have time to transfer your answers into answer sheet. And in case of headings, about task to assign headings, I didn't write directly into answer sheet because sometimes headings can be quite tricky. And actually, I wrote answers about headings into answer sheet when I complete the task completely. And word completion. There is main advice to understand what kind of word needs to be put into. For example, whether it's adjective or noun, and or verb, for example.
So you were noting the kind of answer you would expect for each of the different blanks. I mean, the kind of word that you would expect, whether it's a number or whether it's certain parts of speech, so an adjective. So this is something that you were actively doing, is that right?
Yeah, actually, the IELTS taker should be aware about the question and about what he is asked about. For example, usually there is, in general training, I mean, there is one question for one paragraph or two questions, and since you read one paragraph, you might be able to answer to one or two questions. So it's I did so. I read paragraph and then answer. I didn't read all the text and then read the questions and so on. I do these two tasks simultaneously because and since I and when I read the whole text, actually all the questions were answered.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yeah, so it's a good strategy to follow then.
Yes, and what I also want to mention, actually, the main key is to learn new vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the main key for whole IELTS tests. Learn how to paraphrase or find synonyms for words.
So in the listening and reading sections, what were the topics that you saw in your exam? Can you recall them?
Well, yes. In listening, I came across a very unusual task, and which I've never met before. It was in third section. I expected to find multiple choice there, and since the listening section began, I turned pages into the third section because it was the hardest section for me in order to read as much as I could, and I found a completely new task. Actually, there were two students speaking about they finished their studies at university or at college, and they were given a leaflet with statements, and I needed to recognize which statement they agree or they didn't agree or they neither agree nor disagree, and it was quite unusual for me. And but I think as I scored 8.5, I did well.
Yes. Yeah. So with regards to the listening and the reading, were the topics, was it about travel or was it about, some kind of animal species, or what were the specific, if you can remember them, the different topics that you had to listen to?
Well, in listening, it was about organizing leisure activity like hiking, touring mountain, and it's the second section. And the first section was, I think, application completion or something like that.
Right, yeah.
And as usual. And in the fourth section, it was scientific audio about forming an islands from erupted volcano, something like that. And life in this island. And in reading, it was quite usual general reading. So some about stadium. Let me remember. There were statements about stadium, and it is needed to assign headings. And I clearly remember last section. It was about crocodile and how crocodile live and so on. And also I want to add, in the listening section, I tried to guess answers before the audio began. Since when you have pause before audio, I tried to to speculate answers and write words in the gaps, so that I can be aware of what I was listening to.
Okay. So that's a very good tip then. So you were kind of trying to predict what sort of answer you could possibly see. Okay, now if we move to the writing section, so you scored 7, which is a very respectable mark considering this was your very first exam. And then you were saying something about seeing a question that I had included in a video that I had uploaded to YouTube, like it was a repeat question. So what's the story there?
Yeah, actually, I watched your recent video that when you said that all the questions repeated this year, and actually this happened to me. They paraphrase and old essay questions about how is it. Let me see. The question was about whether should schools taught their pupils how to manage money. Do you agree or disagree? It was a completely argument essay, and you have an old video on the YouTube where you describe how to write a body paragraph, and you clearly explain that in Canada children have 8 hours school day, and in the case if 1 hour will be devoted to personal finance management, their studies will be jeopardized. And I reproduce this idea, and actually I was trying to remember what was the second paragraph in your essay, because I didn't know that it was video about only one paragraph, and I couldn't remember, so that I make up an argument as well as example, made up an argument as well as example, and actually I go for that students don't have their stable source of income, so they don't have their money, and it is not worth to teach them how to manage their money while they don't have their money.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. What was the letter topic for your task 1? Or what was the prompt?
Letter topic was informal letter to a friend who comes into your city, and you should suggest him an accommodation and how you know about this accommodation, and what facilities it includes, and how to get in this accommodation.
Okay.
And actually, in my writing section, I started to write from second part because it was 2/3 of the overall score, and since it is easy to write a letter, I started with my essay. And actually, I wrote my essay pretty fast in 30 minutes, I think. And then I wrote my letter, and I had a couple of minutes, I think about 10 minutes to proofread.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's great.
All the text. And I want to give advice to potential IELTS takers that is it crucial to reproduce or rewrite model essays, because doing so you can understand how the sentence are interwoven, and what role sentence play in the whole essay, because each sentence has to have play a specific role in whole sentence and reflect into a topic or into a task. And when I started to reproduce Ryan's essays, I understand it, I think, pretty well what role play each sentence. Because I tried to, when I started to to write my essays. I write it like blindly because I try to understand. I try to include a lot of my essays, and they were bulky and not cohesive, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But when I, as I said before, reproduce your essays, it was quite easier for me. And also it is important to include complex structures, complex sentence in essay. Also passive voice participles, but it is also needs to be, but there's also need to bear in mind that you should make your sentence as short as you can, because to avoid repetition. And the main idea is to have a clear message. And if you, it's probably better to use more simpler sentences in order to have a clear idea.
Yeah. No, that is a good strategy. Yeah. And if you start by just making, I think that sometimes candidates, they overcomplicate things. So they start the sentence not really sure where they're going. Keep it simple is great advice.
Yeah, even one sentence can derail your essay.
Absolutely.
Actually, I didn't use more than 2 independent clauses in one sentence because 3 is too much. And I wanted to say that in Russian language we like to use long, complicated sentence divided by commas. But in English it is hard for non-native speaker to produce such sentences. So keep it clear and short, and have a clear message and each sentence.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say that it might be spent about 5 minutes to plan your essay. And the most important part in essay is an introduction, because introduction is like a guideline about your essay. And actually, one more piece of advice, that do not write a sentence until you construct it in your head, because otherwise you will rub out again and again and spend your precious time. Once you construct your sentence in your head, begin to write, but you should be able to construct it pretty fast. Because when you rub out, you have dirty blank answer sheet, and another point, you waste your time erasing your pencil.
Yeah. That is good advice. Yeah.
And actually, there is very important advice. In the internet, there are a lot of model essays that are fake model essays. They are presented as model essays, but they really aren't. And for non-experienced IELTS taker, it is hard to recognize like bad model essay. For example, I came across in App Store application about model essays, but they were written by a non-native speaker. And actually, when I was reading the very first essay, I came across the rudest mistake. He was writing about environment, and he used this word without article there. Like, we should protect environment. But being not very good in English, I know that the environment should be the environment.
Yeah.
So it is important to recognize model essays. I would like to advise IELTS takers to use your essays, and this guy Adam from Engvit.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the helpful thing about platforms like YouTube is that they're very public, and there are, it's not just candidates that are accessing this material and upvoting or downvoting it. It's also examiners. that are online, or IELTS instructors, or people that would be able to say with authority whether the materials are indeed helpful to the candidate or they're unhelpful, like the materials that you found in that app.
Yes, another source of trustworthy material is at the end of the IELTS book. There are some essays and letters are written by examiners, so they can be taken as model essays, but or probably candidates who achieved high band can be taken as model essays. But as I was learning your strategy how to write essays, sometimes these essays in IELTS book are quite not the same as you explained. So it was easier to me to follow your strategy.
Your speaking then, should we move to speaking?
Yeah, we can move to speaking. But there is not very much that I wanted to say, because my speaking is my worst skill.
Well, why don't you tell us about the experience in the examination room, because that can be helpful to candidates too.
Well, actually my exam was divided into 2 days. One day I had listening, reading and writing test, and the next day I had a speaking test. And I went into the room. There was an examiner, and she presented herself. And actually my topic was, I think, quite difficult. And I was asked about colors. Actually, my cue card was to describe a place, what was full of colors, or what was very colorful place, some bizarre card. And then third part of speaking test was related to colors, like how people are affected by colors, why business people prefer wear black colors or not bright colors, and about colors in advertising and the colors in course books. Also, I had an experience to ask examiner, because I didn't hear the word course, and I asked her, like, excuse me, what books did you say? And she repeated. Actually, I was preparing to speaking throughout my classes. I was preparing the cue cards, and we speak all the topics, I think. And it is worth to record yourself, record your voice, and see where your weak places. And also I try to dictate on my mobile phone, so as to mobile phone recognize my speech into written language, It was very important for me, because I doing so, I know that my language is recognizable or understandable. And also, I think, actually, I was preparing to speak for 1 minute and 30 seconds exactly. I timed myself, and I knew when I should to stop speaking. But when I was in the exam room, I think that I should speak until the examiner stopped me. So I think I should be preparing for speaking for 2 minutes. And another speaking advice is to pay attention what tense you are speaking. For example, whether past tense or present perfect or present simple. Use the linking words, and in the second part with cue card, tell a story. I told the story. I didn't answer directly to the questions. I told the story about colorful place, and actually I resort to imagining this story. Actually, I lied about this place, but I didn't know what to say, so I resort to lying.
Yep. Well, that's a common strategy, to be honest. If you don't know, then you have to say something. So it's and the examiner is not not to, they don't care if you're lying. It's more just a test of whether or not you can,
There is this thing that you should be consistent in your life. Otherwise, you'll be caught.
Yeah.
So, I want to share my experience how to improve grammar. I want to say grammar, writing grammar.
Mm-hmm.
What books I used. Actually, to improve my writing grammar, because for speaking I didn't have much to say.
Mm-hmm.
For writing, I was studying for the Murphy book. It's Blue Book, English grammar,
mm-hmm.
and also there is a good vocabulary source like Mangoosh. It's Mangooch.
Mm-hmm.
It's for vocabulary, vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm studying in advanced grammar book, Green Book,
mm-hmm.
the same as Murphy book. So now we can move to the test day.
Mm-hmm. So why don't you describe then the experience that you had in the exam on your test day?
Well, it was quite exhausting,
mm-hmm.
but I expected that, so it was expected for me. And actually it was a big, bright room. There was enough light, and there were as many as 30 students taking Ielts,
mm-hmm.
and they set a table for me. So each table was set for each student before we went into the venue.
Mm-hmm.
And they provide 2 pencils, 1 mechanical pencils and 1 usual one. And also they provide a bottle of water. Audio was provided. There was an audio system with big speakers, so it wasn't hard to listen to. It wasn't hard to listen to the audio.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a projector, and it was projecting time on the wall, so we all knew how much time we have to
mm-hmm.
the end of the section and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And also there were notifications about time notifications. And I want to say that it is possible to rub out answers from answer sheet, because I was told that once you wrote your answer in the answer sheet, you can't erase something.
Mm-hmm.
But actually I did so, and in reading and in listening answers sheet,
mm-hmm.
and my erased answers and rewritten answers was accepted.
Okay.
So it might be also noted that you cannot go to the bathroom in the last 10 minutes. So if you want to go bathroom and you see that you have time, go to the bathroom before the
mm-hmm.
time of 10 minutes at the end of the test.
So how much time did you have between each of the different sections of the exam, between listening and reading and writing?
Well, not very much. It was time needed to collect answer sheet from 13 people
mm-hmm.
and give out another materials
mm-hmm.
for these 30 people. It's about 5 minutes, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that in the listening, they removed an example from the listening test in 2020. So you should be prepared.
And was that the case in your exam? You did not have an example?
Yeah, I didn't have an example. So
yeah.
What I heard, now we shall begin.
Mm-hmm.
And also the important thing that I have been preparing to the listening since the audio began.
Mm-hmm.
But in the real test, there is a specific time when you can look at your booklet. when they say now turn your page or something like that, not from the time since the audio begin.
Ah, okay.
So you have reduced time in comparison to the whole audio.
Ah, okay.
About few minutes are taken from.
Yeah. Well, so I think people are going to have to edit their strategies a little bit. But it's good that you're sharing the experience that you've had in 2020, because it does sound like there are some important differences. How many proctors were walking around while you were doing the exam?
Yeah, it was 3 people, and they come to each student in each section, I mean reading, listening, writing, and they check their passports every time.
I see.
I had my passport checked by 3 or 4 times, I think.
So you said you've scheduled a second one?
Yeah, I want to score 7 in my speaking. Yeah, I want to add that it is important that students prepare for the authentical IELTS books, and they need to do at least 10 whole tests from beginning to end. But if they don't have time, they should do each sections. For example, 1 hour for reading for one day and 1 hour for writing for next day. I think that it is important to do by big chunks, not split. Like I will read 1 piece of text today and read 1 section of and listen 1 section today. So it should be entire.
Yeah, so train yourself to have the stamina to carry out the whole exam.
Yeah, and when the students get used to this amount of time, or getting used to what they will have to do, it will be not hard at the exam day. And it's also important not to panic, because it's not a good thing to panic on the exam room.
Absolutely.
To keep calm, because you've been preparing a lot. You should know everything, and all will be all right. Because if you have any, because if you hesitate about your knowledge, probably it's too early to take your IELTS. You should be sure of your knowledge, so you won't be worried then.
Well, Leon, I want to thank you for sharing all of this information with us and for sharing your personal experience.
Yes, thank you.